Chinese ever send you a little note, say, "Good work, Clif"?
No, not quite. Not quite
see.
like that. No,
Yeah,
no.
all right. Okay, back to the issue.
The CIA, by the way, here though, we offered it to them in a very nascent stage, and they said, interesting. Not our line of country, though. Thanks for the offer.
Now, come on, neither one of us buys that. Maybe not the CIA, but the NRO, the NSA.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody
the
is
PQD or whoever's
that's right.
out there. Yeah.
I mean, they could farm it out to an off-campus organization and say, we have nothing to do with it. They do that all the time.
Yeah, and it may well be a situation, too, of they have something so sophisticated, but they're also in a different kind of a focus. They really want to know who's saying what to whom, and I don't really care. It's too much data to keep track of. I just want to know what's being said.
Right. Well, you are giving them a great deal of information at your expense, which I think is very nice of you. Okay, here's the deal. 3 to 6, 7 months out. We've been talking about this since you and George first came on the program. And back then, you talked about, both of you, a certain date, where the release language begins. In other words, the anticipatory language, the language of, we could go anxiety, stress,
unknown,
paranoia, fear, fear of the unknown, all of that, really working together to build some momentum in this change of language texture that points to a certain period of time at which point there is a major shift. A release begins and the language change, and the language apparently reflects the release of a tremendous amount of tension, worry,
emotional
fear,
tension, correct.
Emotional tension. Now, the date for this is still, as I read Part 4,
it has not changed. When we run our data, we still get the same calculations and arrive at that same date, correct?
Now, I don't know if we should mention it or not, but it
doesn't bother me. It's really one of these strange things where you have to think about this philosophically. If something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen. The Mongolians say you ride out to meet your destiny, or you're overridden by the stampede of fate. So I say, well, let it out there, because I can certainly be wrong. I hate to say this, but I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. After reading and spending as much time on this, we
got pretty good with that earthquake in China. Okay, we were a bit wrong because so far we haven't had a corresponding one here in the U.S., but we're getting closer on some of this stuff. And when we talk about the big trends, we've been pretty good these last years.
Yes, you have. The number of earthquakes off the Pacific Northwest coast, Oregon coast especially, been swarm after swarm. So, but that's kind of an ongoing chronic.
Yeah, but just
situation.
Today we've lost 2 sizable lakes on the west coast of the Americas, one in California and one in Chile, where they just disappeared overnight. That is not a good sign.
Wait a minute. All right, hold on. I'm a journalist, a newsman, and I did not hear about these stories, so we'll hear about that, if you would, when we come back in just a minute. Clif is our guest here. Half Past Human is the site, and we will be right back. Okay, we're back. Now, I'm going to read just a little bit of this, and we'll get to the punchline in a minute. This is from the Terra category. Just to read how the... This is very interestingly written, and the words themselves are in brackets. So I'm going to read you just a couple, 3, 4 sentences, and the words, I'll tell you where they are. These are the words that are picked up by Clif's software, and they work them into an analysis. Very interesting. All right, it reads thusly. Or perhaps it reads thus. Which is it, Clif?
It reads thus.
Well, it depends on what side of the tracks you live on. Thusly he spoke the words. It sounds like a Sunday morning church service. The Terra entity continues to accrue values for a bracket flooding/changing event / occurrence. Now, those are the three words and expressions, correct? Right there?
Correct. Those
flooding.
Are the words that are coming out of the archetype.
So you're
correct.
Picking out flooding, changing event, and occurrence. Those are
correct.
The words that are actually picking up, being picked up by the spiders as being new, unusual in their frequency of use or general appearance. All right, I'll start again. The Terra entity, Earth, continues to accrue values for a bracket, flooding, changing event, occurrence, end bracket, in 2009, which is described as bracket, impacting, end bracket, the bracket, coastal plains, end bracket, across the planet. Now I'll read it without the brackets. The Terra entity continues to accrue values for a flooding, changing event, occurrence in 2009, which is described as impacting the coastal plains across the planet. The bracket impact, end bracket, is described as bracket beginning with sound, end bracket, and this bracket sound / noise, end bracket, is described as being both bracket in the ground / earth, end bracket, as well as like bracket thunder from a clear sky, end bracket. Read it without the brackets. The impact is described as being with sound, and this sound noise is described as being both in the ground or earth, as well as like thunder from a clear sky. And we'll go on. We note that the bracket sound / noise, end bracket, can also be interpreted as a bracket wave, end bracket. And so at this point, the higher level of descriptor, that is a bracket wave, end bracket, may well be more appropriate to the occurrence being described. Now read it one more time here without the brackets. We note that the sound or noise can also be interpreted as a wave. And so at this point, the higher level of descriptor, that is a wave, may well be more appropriate to the occurrence being described. All right, sir, if you'd comment on that, and we'll...
Sure. Basically, we get giant contexts that we have to drill down in and see where they're supported. So many of our data, our piles of data, if you will, look like lots of little speckles building sort of irregular pyramids. And, for instance, an archetype of a wave includes within it a sound, which is also related to the word noise, but they're not quite the same. In some cases, sound does not imply feeling it, but noises frequently do, like the noise of thunder implies the body feeling it, whereas you hear a sound. Mm-hmm. So we have all these nuances involved. But basically what we're saying is that the language shifts show an association linked in time to 2009, maybe as early as the end of the first quarter in 2009, which, because we work around the equinox, work around a lunar calendar and try and relate it to the solar calendar based on the equinox and the solstices, we're finding an association with some form of a wave, that is to say maybe a tsunami, but also maybe something slightly different from that affects the coastal plains of the planet in general. Now, this might be, we have to be real careful here, because frequently it appears that what we're picking up on are the words that people will be using in the future, and not necessarily the event per se. Okay, because if we want to look at it in a strange kind of a way, all humans are psychic. They all pick up psychic impressions. Some of them know they're psychic and speak about it. Others just discount it, but they're still psychic and they leak it out in their language. In being psychic, though, they're picking up impressions of the future through their own future bodies, if you will, through their own future being. And therefore, if they were aware of specific words appearing in the future and they came back, so to speak, then we would be aware of those words, not necessarily the event that triggered those words. So a good instance is the Northeast power outage. The very first thing that occurred on that Northeast power outage in 2003 or 2004 was the thought that it was terrorism. So our prediction for it 3 weeks in advance, our forecast of it, included that idea that maybe it was terrorism, because that was the first word that rolled off everybody's lips as a result of that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, I understand. I follow. Sure.
Okay, so it's as though we're getting, as though everybody in 4 weeks from now sat down and read the newspaper, and we got to pick out some of the words coming through as they were reading the newspaper. But really what we're getting is their interpretation of those words, not necessarily the underlying event. So we're getting this description for what we've been calling a global coastal event. But it doesn't mean that we're out there as prophets saying, run, run, giant wave coming, going to wash everybody into the middle of all their country.
Gee, that's not what you told me.
No, just a second.
Get to the high ground, Jeff, quick.
Well, okay, now this makes sense, though, because what we do then thereafter is we take that language and then we analyze it against real-world potentials before we write about it. And one of the real-world potentials that we actually have noticed and have gotten reports from subscribers all over the planet is that, indeed, the water levels are rising at the moment and have been, and noticeably so. I get reports from Finland, from Portugal, from India.
Talking about ocean, lakes, everything? What?
Ocean levels. And also, we can't discount the fact that all the